What's going on, everyone? It's Friday, August 6th, and in this trade recap video, I'm going to go over the 2 trades that I took on Robinhood within the first 14 minutes of the open and made $205. And kind of the theme of this video, or a topic that I want to talk about, is appreciating the small green days. No matter how much money it is, I try to put it into perspective and just make sure to be happy with the outcome. And especially if I traded well, if I took good setups, I managed risk well, and I make money, not to overthink it and be upset about I could have made more, I should have made more. Social media does a really good job of making it seem like if you're not making thousands each and every single day, you're a bad trader. And yes, of course, it's always nice to grow, want more, continuously stretch those goals. But at the same time, you got to be realistic. And it can be poisonous when you see a lot of people posting really big P&Ls and then you think wherever they are in their journey is where you need to be the exact same time. And if you're not performing like they are, then you're just not good. Trading is very hard. It's a heck of a roller coaster. There's going to be a lot of ups, a lot of downs. There's going to be big green days, a lot of small green days, small red days, and then sometimes there's really big red days, which suck. It's not about hitting big winners every single day. As a matter of fact, that approach is usually the reason why people lose money and then they're out of the game pretty quick. It's all about taking it slow, playing the long game, figuring out what works best for you, taking quality setups, managing risk well, and once doing that really well, usually the money follows. I've been doing this for almost 5 years now, so I've been doing it for a while, and I still appreciate the small green days. When you can push your ego aside and learn to accept what the market gives you because it's different each and every day, that's when you're in a pretty good spot as a trader. Okay, so now let's go through the watch list. I was looking at Tesla, Square, Amazon, Dkng, DDOG, AMD, and then 10 minutes before the bell, I sent a tweet out to the newsletter watch list saying that I'm adding Hood to the list because it caught some momentum in the pre-market and I wanted to have it on watch. Okay, so now let's get into the technicals of the overall market and then the watch list. Like always, the levels I was looking at SPY, prior day's high, if it gets above that, new all-time high, looks good to the upside. If there's any weakness, just knowing where prior day's low is and also knowing where the 9 EMA on the daily is. Okay, now the Qs, the levels I was looking at, prior day's high, gets through that, would also be a new all-time high. If there was any weakness in the market, just knowing where prior day's low was and also knowing where the 9 EMA on the daily was. Okay, now Tesla, which had a handful of days of consolidation, it did look like a nice flag pattern. The levels I was looking at, like always, prior day's high, pre-market low, and prior day's low. But also knowing that if it did take out that 710-ish area, it looked like it had downside room because it was pretty far away from the 9 EMA on the daily. And if it was strong and it started to take out 721 to kind of the 725 resistance area, it looked pretty good to the upside. Okay, now Square, and unfortunately, I missed this yesterday. Heck of a move. Still very strong though, so I wanted to keep it on watch. I thought maybe this could have a day 2 continuation move after making a new all-time high. The levels I was looking at, that all-time high level, 289.23, pre-market high, pre-market low, and also knowing where the prior day's low was, just in case if for some reason it started to sell off aggressively, and that was at 264.77. Okay, now Amazon, and the reason I like this is because it had the big gap down due to earnings. It's been in a range. If it took out the high of that range, which was 33.91, it looked like it could move its way into the upside gap, but also knowing where that 9 EMA was. And if it did show some weakness and took out that 33.40, 33.41 area, it did look like it had some downside room. Okay, now Dkng, and the reason I had this on my list is because it reported earnings. It had a lot of volume trading pre-market, had a nice gap up. It was trading above this prior pivot high resistance area at 53.39. I thought if it could hold it, this looks pretty good to the upside. Maybe it can break out. The next level to the upside was pre-market high at 54.95, but also knowing that if it could not hold that gap, it did have some downside room to 52.50 support area. And now DDOG, and the reason I like this is because it had a big gap up due to earnings and it held that gap all right. So I was thinking if it could take out the prior day's high, maybe this has more continuation. So the levels I was looking at was that all-time high, also prior day's high level, 134.38, pre-market high, pre-market low, and if there was any weakness, just knowing where the low was, and that was at 126.33. If it takes that out, it did look like it had some downside room. Okay, now AMD, and the reason I like this is because it's very extended on the daily. It had its first red day. Doesn't mean that this won't eventually go higher, but just thinking that it's probably due for a little bit of a pullback. It could come in and that would be healthy. So knowing prior day's high, 117.68, if for some reason this got bought up pretty quick, and if it took out prior day's low, 111.59, it did look like there was some downside room to the 9 EMA on the daily. Okay, and the last one on the list is Robinhood. The reason that I like this, or at least closer to the open I started to like it, is because if you see here in the pre-market, it caught a ton of momentum, increased volume, so felt like it was worth having on watch. The levels I was looking at, prior day's high was pretty far away, but being that this is a new IPO, you never know what can happen. Pre-market high, pre-market low, and if there was any weakness in this gap got sold, knowing where prior day's low was, and that was at 50.46. Okay, so getting into the first trade on Robinhood, as you can see, I actually put a trend line. This looked pretty good to the downside at first. Had to push off the open. It got below VWAP, was consolidating for a little bit. Now this is above VWAP, and the momentum is really starting to pick up. That's a heck of a strong candle. So if this takes out the high, that looks like a good opening range break to the upside. I end up getting long 500 shares, and I ended up getting filled at 59.29. I get out of this pretty quick, just because I felt like I chased this candle a little bit and I have seen those high of days stuff before. And being that there still was a lot of resistance from the prior day, I didn't really feel good about my entry. And when I don't feel good about something, I'm willing to get out quick. So as it pulls in, it fails to continue higher. Just to be safe, I make sure to get out. And I got out at 59.30 for a flat trade. I know it seems like I probably got at it a little prematurely. I was in it for less than 20 seconds. But when my gut tells me I just don't feel great about it, I have no problem cutting it quick because I can always reevaluate the setup. And that's exactly what I did. So I'm just watching price action and I see that this is still holding up. If this takes out the high day and it has a whole number above 60, if there's any size there, maybe it can really move through it. I end up taking 5 calls. I just felt more comfortable trading the options. I got the 60s and I got filled at $6.50. The negative thing with this trade is that I continued to chase that. So rather than waiting for a pullback, I just wanted to take that 60 break. And I felt like if it could get through there, then maybe it has some sort of momentum pop. So Robinhood pulled back a little bit, but instantly got bought back up. You can see by the wick at the bottom of that red candle, above the 9 EMA, above the VWAP, formed a nice quick flag pattern, took out the whole number 60. And now I just want to see, can this really catch some momentum or not? But as you can see, as it continues to push up, it's just showing a little bit of struggle. We all know in volatile stocks, when they get moving, they can go pretty quick. So anytime I start to see some struggle and it pulls in, just to be careful, I want to get out of the position, and I ended up taking profits right there. And I'm glad I took profits into that quick push higher because it had a pretty nasty rejection. And had I been in the trade just for another minute, that loss would have been huge. And then something kind of interesting for maybe people who have not seen this before. If you look at the top right of my level 2, it says CB, that means can't borrow. Even though I had a feeling I was not going to get filled, I still wanted to see what would happen. And then I took the pattern because it looked pretty good. So I ended up trying to short right there 200 shares on the low of day because after that huge push higher and it got back below VWAP, was starting to trend below the 9 EMA. That's a technical pattern that looks pretty good. I went for it just to see what would happen, and I did not get filled. And it's unfortunate because had there been shares to borrow and I was able to actually take that short, once it broke that low of day, it had a very nice move lower. And of course, you know me, I get the quick move, I take quick profits. Okay, so let's check out the P&L. So ended up making $200 on the 60 calls and $5 on that first trade with 500 shares. So that was a trade recap. Appreciate you watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video. I just want to highlight a couple really cool things that I have to offer. The first is my newsletter watch list that I'm going to be posting on my private Twitter 30 minutes before the open of each trading day. Here's an example of what that's going to look like. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the market, the SPY, the Qs, the upside levels, the downside levels, and then a sentence or two as to the overall bigger picture. Make sure to highlight any market news or events that are happening that day. And then I'm going to list the 4 to 6 stocks that I'm watching that day. If there's any company specific news, all the upside levels and the downside levels, and then do a quick bigger picture, a couple sentences as to what's going on in the daily chart. This is everything that's in my head prior to market open. This is how I prepare, and a really easy way to get access to my trading process. One page with everything I'm looking at, all the technical levels, and all the news delivered 30 minutes before market open in a really organized fashion. Also, I have a call service, so if you want something that's a little bit less of a commitment, you want to connect with me directly, talk about my trading, my journey along the way, and just connect with another trader, this is really great. And this can be a video call or a regular call, whatever you're comfortable with. It's a one-time fee, and it's going to be for 1 hour. So if you're interested in either one of these, I will put the links in the description below.